The Pentagon just pulled off a secret, full-scale rehearsal for a massive airstrike on Iran, and they did it in total silence. While the world was looking elsewhere, the US military quietly shifted into a full battle posture, moving the pieces on the board for a strike against Iran's most strategic targets. Analysts look for red flags before a single missile is loaded, and right now, the Pentagon is leaving 5 lethal fingerprints across the Middle East. Step 1. The fuel bridge. 100th Air Refueling Wing tankers, including the KC-46A Pegasus, are surging from the UK to Al Udeid, building a 24/7 gas station in the sky for heavy bombers. Step 2. Persistent ISR. NPU-4C Triton drones and RC-135V/W rivet joints have established a permanent electronic watch over every Iranian radar and missile site. Step 3. Forward kinetic seeding. 509th Bomb Wing B-2 Spirits are now at Diego Garcia, while 494th Expeditionary F-15E Strike Eagles, the world's premier bunker busters, are cocked and locked in Jordan. Step 4. Naval Encirclement. The USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, and Strike Group 3 have abandoned the Pacific and are racing to the Gulf to join the Aegis destroyers USS Spruance and USS Michael Murphy. Step 5. Digital Blindout. U.S. Cyber Command has begun flickering Tehran's secure networks, while 11th Air Defense Patriot and THAAD batteries at Prince Sultan Air Base have officially gone hot. And here is the most chilling fingerprint. The snatch teams are already in place. The elite Delta Force and 161st Night Stalkers, the exact units that just executed Operation Absolute Resolve to capture Maduro, have moved their MH-60M Blackhawks into Iraq's Diyala and Wasit provinces. They are sitting less than 300 miles from Tehran, waiting for the green light.
Look, most people think wars just happen. Like, one bad headline drops and suddenly the Pentagon is scrambling to figure things out on the fly. Huge misconception. That's not how the US military actually operates. The truth is, long before the public ever hears the word conflict, the US military has already spent years, sometimes decades, rehearsing the exact scenarios analysts are watching today. And if you want to understand how the US plans for the Middle East, including Iran, you have to understand one of the most important military exercises most Americans have never heard of. It's called Exercise Internal Look. Internal Look is where the Pentagon stress tests how the entire US military would respond if a crisis in the Middle East suddenly went from bad to uncontrollable. And the reason Exercise Internal Look exists goes back to one of the most painful failures in modern American military history. In 1980, the US launched Operation Eagle Claw, a daring mission to rescue 52 Americans held hostage inside the US Embassy in Tehran after Iran's Islamic Revolution. You know how that ended. Helicopters broke down in the desert. A deadly collision killed 8 US service members. The mission collapsed before it even reached Tehran. But the biggest lesson wasn't about helicopters or weather. It was this. The US military didn't have a system that allowed the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Special Operations to plan and fight as one unified force in the Middle East. That failure forced a reckoning. So in 1981, US Central Command created Internal Look, a way to put generals, planners, and commanders into a realistic crisis before the real one ever arrived. At first, Iran wasn't even the main concern. During the Cold War, the Pentagon's nightmare scenario was a Soviet push south through Iran's rugged Zagros Mountains, straight toward the world's most critical oil routes. So for years, Internal Look focused on one brutal question. If a superpower invasion hit Iran tomorrow, could the US move enough force, fast enough, to stop it? From the early 1980s through the end of the Cold War, planners repeatedly ran scenarios involving rapid deployments across Iranian terrain, mountain passes, deserts, infrastructure choke points. Which means something important gets overlooked today. The US military has been digitally mapping, modeling, and stress testing Iranian geography for over 4 decades. And Internal Look doesn't just simulate conflict. Its timing has an eerie reputation. In the summer of 1990, General Norman Schwarzkopf ran an Internal Look scenario centered on a fictional Middle Eastern dictator invading a neighboring country. The exercise wrapped up in July. 1 week later, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. When the real war came, the US wasn't improvising. Operation Desert Storm followed the same command relationships, logistics flows, and operational logic that had just been rehearsed.
The pattern repeated in 2002. Internal Look was used to rehearse a rapid, high-tempo campaign into Iraq, one that didn't rely on months of slow build-up. That same planning framework later became the foundation for Operation Iraqi Freedom. The commanders weren't guessing. They were executing a play they had already walked through in detail. And here's where Iran enters the picture directly. Most critically, the US has already used this exercise to specifically rehearse a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. In 2012, Internal Look was used to simulate the aftermath of an uncoordinated Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites, leading to a wider chaos in the Middle East, involving significant American casualties. According to detailed reports, the wargame played out a narrative in which the US was pulled into a conflict after Iranian missiles struck a US Navy warship in the Persian Gulf. That single simulated hit left over 200 Americans dead, a black swan event that made a full-scale US invasion of the Iranian mainland an absolute certainty. 200 casualties is a specific, documented detail from the 2012 leaked reports, famously covered by the New York Times in 2012. The simulation even gamed out US retaliation strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities after Iranian missiles struck a Navy warship. That exercise definitely would have helped recent US operation against Iran nuclear site in Operation Midnight Hammer. And that brings us to the most important part. What actually happens inside Exercise Internal Look? All right, everyone, listen up. Because if you want to understand how the US military stays at the top of the food chain, you've got to understand the behind-the-scenes logistics that make it happen. We're talking about Exercise Internal Look, and I'm going to break down exactly how they move a high-tech war room across the planet. First off, let's talk about the TOCs. That stands for Tactical Operations Centers. Imagine the most high-tech gaming setup you've ever seen, then put it on steroids and stuff it into massive shipping containers. These aren't just tents. They are climate-controlled modular shelters packed with very large communications pipes, advanced computer servers, and video conferencing tech. These containers are the brains of the operation. When it's time to roll, the military doesn't wait around. They pack these TOCs onto heavy-lift aircraft in Tampa, Florida, where CENTCOM is headquartered, and fly them halfway around the world to places like Qatar. Once they hit the ground, they don't just sit there. They set up a massive command and control complex right in the heart of the Middle East. The goal is simple: make sure the general can do anything in a desert base that he can do back at headquarters in Florida. Now, here is where it gets wild. Once these centers are hot, meaning plugged in and powered up, the commanders start what General Tommy Franks called a vividly realistic but bloodless campaign. This is high-stakes digital chess. They aren't moving real tanks yet. They are using high-tech simulations that map out the terrain pixel by pixel in 3D. These simulations allow the US to practice network-centric warfare. This means they link everyone together: air, land, maritime, and special operations into one giant digital brain. They can see the whole battle space from a god's eye view and coordinate strikes with insane precision before a single shot is fired in the real world. For decades, the US has been using these bloodless war games to rehearse exactly how to hit targets, manage logistics, and outmaneuver enemies in Iran. By the time the order comes to go kinetic, the military has already won the war 1,000 times on a screen. If Internal Look is the brain of this operation, then what we're seeing across the Middle East right now in January 2026 is the muscle finally starting to flex. The simulation is over, and the real-world indicators, the 5 lethal fingerprints of a strike, are appearing in plain sight for anyone who knows where to look. It starts with step 1, the fuel bridge. Open source intelligence and flight trackers have gone into overdrive, detecting a massive silent surge of KC-135 Stratotankers and the advanced KC-46A Pegasus refuelers. These aren't just routine flights. They are forming a continuous aerial pipeline toward Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Alongside them, heavy-lift C-17s and C-5M Galaxies are dumping tons of munitions and spare parts into the region. In the world of high-stakes air campaigns, you don't move this much fuel and logistics unless you are preparing to keep hundreds of combat jets in the air for days on end. But the most chilling indicator isn't just the fuel, it's the shadow warriors moving into position. We've entered step 2 and 3, persistent ISR and forward kinetic seeding. We're seeing a glaring signal with the redeployment of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, better known as Delta Force. These are the same elite operators who just captured Maduro in a high-stakes grab, and they've now vanished into temporary bases in Iraq's Diyala and Wasit provinces, right on the Iranian doorstep. They are supported by the Night Stalkers of the 161st SOAR, the world's most elite helicopter pilots, waiting for the digital blindout to begin so they can hunt high-value targets in the dark.
High above them, the steel rain is already in place. The Pentagon has moved B-2 Spirit stealth bombers to the remote island of Diego Garcia, putting them within a single flight's reach of Iran's most hardened nuclear sites. Meanwhile, B-52s and B-1 Lancers are rotating through the theater, ready to launch massive cruise missile salvos from safely outside Iranian airspace. On the front lines, the 5th-generation Ghost Fleet, F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightnings are packed into Al Dhafra and Al Udeid, while F-15E Strike Eagles at Muwafiq Salti in Jordan are reportedly already cocked and locked for deep strike missions. This isn't a defensive posture. It is an assembled firing squad. What's truly fascinating is what's missing from the map, leading us to step 4, Naval Encirclement. There is a total carrier gap in the Middle East. The USS Gerald R. Ford is tied up in the Caribbean, and the Abraham Lincoln is halfway across the world in the Indo-Pacific. To the untrained eye, it looks like a retreat. But the reality is far more calculated. In place of the massive, easy-to-track aircraft carriers, the US has saturated the region with guided missile destroyers like the USS Mitchell and the USS McFall. These smaller, more agile wolves are stalking the Strait of Hormuz, ready to counter Iranian small boat swarms without the vulnerability of a 100,000-ton carrier in the way. Also, there are reports indicating the USS Abraham Lincoln has been ordered to break from the South China Sea to the Middle East to fill the carrier gap. Finally, the shield is being raised for the counterpunch. At Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, Patriot and THAAD missile batteries are locked and loaded, standing guard over the region's oil and military hubs. They are the final piece of the puzzle, designed to catch the inevitable retaliation once the digital blindout of Step 5 begins. Every indicator, from the Delta Force snatch teams in Iraq to the B-2 bombers in the Indian Ocean, points to one inescapable conclusion. The Pentagon isn't just ready to strike Iran. They are currently waiting for the final green light to execute a plan they've been perfecting for 45 years. The countdown has officially started. But the most important questions are the ones being asked in living rooms across America right now. I want to hear your perspective in the comments. Does the presence of the same Delta Force units that captured Maduro mean we're looking at a recovery mission or a targeted removal of Iranian leadership? If the hostilities against civilians inside Iran were to stop tomorrow, do you believe the US should still follow through with this kinetic action? I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who stayed until the very end. It's because of viewers like you that we can keep digging into the facts the mainstream media misses. This is a critical moment for our small channel to grow. So if you found this breakdown valuable, please give us a hype using that new button below. Share this video with one person and hit subscribe. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss our next emergency update. I'll see you in the comments.